So this post has been brought to you by Bridgerton. It's the series of books that have inspired Shonda Rhimes' latest Regency romance series on Netflix, Bridgerton. I've not read the books and I've seen only a handful of episodes, but I've mainly been focused on the debates regarding the series. The series takes place in Regency, England, and there has been debate about how to properly classify this series. I would say fantasy, historical, alternate world fantasy. That should seem uncontroversial, but it's been extremely controversial for various reasons. There is the argument that it pretends that Black and other peoples were never in Regency England, which is when the time period in which the show takes place. So this would have been under King George. Queen Charlotte is portrayed by an actress, I believe her name is Golda. Her last name is slipping me right now, but she appears to be of Black mixed heritage. And Queen Charlotte, of course, is the only real person who appears in Bridgerton. She is the only real person who have existed during that time, and she's being portrayed by an actress who's not of the same race and ethnicity. Of course, this has spawned a lot of ridiculous claims, going back to the rumor that Queen Charlotte herself was supposedly Black, which meant, according to some genealogy charts that I've seen, she had Black ancestry that was something like 6 generations removed. In other words, she was not Black, and that wouldn't be realistic, which brings me back to the argument of it being realistic. It's not. And the argument that it's a fantasy doesn't seem to be satisfying to a lot of its critics. I don't know why. I mean, I get that. You can argue, for example, that Pride and Prejudice is fiction, but it's not classified as a fantasy. Bridgerton is classified as a fantasy, perhaps due to what many people see as the racial dynamic of the show, where it has Black people and Asian people and people of other ethnicities coinciding side by side with white people in British upper class society, which of course is not historically accurate. Now, first, before you jump on me, this is not an argument about whether or not it's believable that Black people existed in Regency England. I'm sure it's very believable, and there were even Black people there with higher status. You know, many frequently point to Belle, who is portrayed in the movie starring Gugu Mbatha-Raw from a few years ago, who was a biracial woman who was in fact higher ranked. And of course, there was the author of Alexandre Dumas, who was also upper class, aristocratic, and also lived during the late 1700s. So this is not an argument of whether or not there were Black people or people in that society who were upper class. It is just, however, if you see in the show, it has Black people in positions such as Duke and Duchess. Can this be put into the same category as, say, Jane Austen stuff, like Pride and Prejudice and Emma? I mean, it's not fantasy in the sense that there's magic. There's no magic in this show. There's no magic whatsoever. So fantasy in that regard seems somewhat limiting. Fantasy implies magic or magical things. Outlander, for example, which is a show it's frequently compared to but shouldn't be. But Outlander is classified as fantasy, but the only fantastical elements in Outlander is in fact the time travel. Besides the time travel, Outlander is pretty much historical fiction. Bridgerton is historical fiction. That's a good way to describe it. The key word there is fiction, but I don't think fiction is strong enough a word to assuage or to cool the critics. I think they wanted it to be classified as historical fantasy, but that's not accurate, as it implies magic. And Bridgerton doesn't have that. What Bridgerton does have is social and racial dynamic that would have been inaccurate to the time period. Not because there weren't upper class or prominent Black people in Britain at the time, but because the interaction that they would have had with the white upper class would not have been the way it is depicted in the show. In the show, in this regard, it's more like an alternate approach to history. History had maybe slavery not happen, maybe not colonialism not happen, maybe if races were allowed to intermingle naturally, this is how it would have worked, without any kind of racial master slave or colonial dynamic. This is so it's a reimagining of how, Regency England could have been without that extra racial baggage. So I would say classifying this as historical fiction or alternative historical fiction would be the accurate way to classify Bridgerton. Um, so far, I don't know what to make of this show. I've seen a few episodes. I'm not in love, and it's Shonda Rhimes. I respect her what she represents, but again, I've never been really a fan of that, I guess, soap opera type, soap opera type show. So I don't know. A while back, I tried watching, what was it called? Star-Crossed, which was another attempt at alternative historical fiction from Rhimes. I guess this is something for her, like she has a thing for this, but that one, quite frankly, was atrocious. Star-Crossed was atrocious, and I don't even want to get into the ways in which it was atrocious. But this is another attempt, another go at that, and I don't know. I don't love it. I'm only a few episodes in. I'm not big on this, but I'm trying to be fair. So I would like to classify this definitely as, I think, alternate historical ultimately makes better sense. But anyway, let me know what you think about Bridgerton. If you have any thoughts, if what you think about the criticism that